when people have me on, they expect me to make the case for essential workers. And of course I do, because everybody understands that case. Now, when Dirty Jobs went on, nobody was making that case, so I felt special, and I felt like iconoclast out there saying, "Hey, don't forget about this one and this one and this one." Right now, while I still hold them in the absolute highest esteem, I'm amazed at how we've taken 35 million people and deemed them unessential. That, to me, is something I reckon we're going to look back on with great linguistic embarrassment.
Main question that I think I wanted to ask you that I think will sort of frame everything else we're going to talk about is that there seems to be a narrative out there from a certain set of people that it's like, oh, going back to work, it's just too risky and no one really wants to work anyway. And, AOC had some version of this sort of thing, like only in America would we value work so high. And as a guy that I have seen do the craziest jobs, where you're stepping in shit, your hands in this animal, the bats, electricity, water, you can give me 10 other examples of the crazy things that you've had people do. You work with people who do this for a living. Can you just talk about just broadly, like the importance of work relative to finding purpose in life, relative to just setting up the rest of the things that you want out of life? Because that actually is one of the things that I'm most worried about right now, that as we sort of give away our day-to-day lives, that we're going to forget that work is important. I'm not talking about slavery, but I'm just talking about the getting up with something to do because it makes you some money so you can do everything else with your life that you want to do.
So it's the frog in the boiling water. I share your fear. It's not going to happen like a light switch, though. What's the old poem? Not with a bang, but a whimper. And the way it'll happen here is people like AOC and others who genuinely, or maybe not so genuinely, believe that work is fundamentally another expression for drudgery are going to make those points. They're going to reduce it to something that's purely transactional. That's the first step. And if you only look at what you do as a means to make money, then then you're not an interesting person. Okay? It's just
I hear you.
It's such a one-dimensional way to look at something that should, in my view, and oftentimes does, define us. It's our work. It's the thing we choose to do with the most conscious chunk of our life. And so to reduce it to a paycheck is dumb. Obviously, there's a giant transactional element involved in it, but there's so much more. Dirty Jobs happened because because I couldn't follow in my grandfather's footsteps, which I very much wanted to do. My pop was a guy who could build a house without a blueprint. He only went to the 7th grade, but he had the chip, right, in his brain that he could take your watch apart and put it back together blindfolded. He could build a house. He could run pipe. He was a master electrician, steam fitter, pipe fitter, mechanic, architect, all of that. Well, he was heroic in his youth, in his time, for those things. Today, he'd be Mr. Cellophane. He's transparent. And so many of those trades, so many of those vocations have fallen into this gap between blue and white collar. They've lost their luster, and we're simply not properly gobsmacked the way we used to be about the miracle of modern plumbing, or the miracle that happens when you flick the switch and the light comes on. So Dirty Jobs was meant to be a tribute to my grandfather initially, and it was, and then it became a rumination on essential work, which is interesting, right? Because obviously the headlines have caught up with that. And that's really been my great good fortune over the years. I do average shows with low production value, but big themes. and I stick with those themes. And every couple of years, the headlines will catch up with them. Dirty jobs and the people we featured became weirdly relevant when the economy crashed in 2009.
Mhm.
And it's become weirdly relevant this month. I've been on every talk show there is to talk about essential work. And it's funny. I'll tell you what happens. I mean, look, there's a poster. I keep it on my wall to remind me. I put a pig on a pedestal many years ago for a lot of reasons. And when people have me on, they expect me to make the case for essential workers. And of course I do, because everybody understands that case. Now, when Dirty Jobs went on, nobody was making that case, so I felt special, and I felt like iconoclast out there saying, "Hey, don't forget about this one and this one and this one." Right now, while I still hold them in the absolute highest esteem, I'm amazed at how we've taken 35 million people and deemed them unessential. That, to me, is something I reckon we're going to look back on with great linguistic embarrassment because
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you next. So continue.
no, I'm it's your
No, but
turn.
that
I just
well, no,
realized,
no, but
what?
that was the question, really. Like once we say to 35 million people, you're not essential. It's not just about the job that they do. It's the message that's getting across to their lives, which in some ways, I actually think in some ways, if they can get through it and then rethink what they do, maybe there is something else they want to do. But I don't think that's the message that most people are going to get. I think we're going to leave people with some sort of existential crisis.
I, we're doing it. It's part of the grieving process. I was saying earlier, people are coming to terms with the fact that their vocations don't matter in the eyes of virtually everyone who has a show to host. Because in our well-intended enthusiasm to celebrate the essential workers, we've done a thing we always do with the language. And I am not a politically correct person. At least I try not to be. But language does matter a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And, in my own foundation, when I feel most comfortably in my own lane, I talk about education and the skilled trades. And higher education is a turn of phrase that has become inculcated. And when we talk about the importance of higher education, well, who would doubt it? Of course, we need big people with big brains doing important work. But what what does higher education imply if not the existence of many forms of lower education, subordinate education? So the language bakes in a terrible kind of analysis. If you don't get a 4-year degree, if you don't buy into the idea that the most expensive path is the best path for the most people, then you wind up doing something. They don't call it lower education because that would just be crazy, but they call it alternative. We have
Mm-hmm.
some alternatives for you, Dave. Maybe you'd like it over here in a trade school, or perhaps you'd
Mm-hmm.
be comfortable over here in a community college, or in a fellowship, or an apprenticeship. So we did that in education, and the unintended consequences are breathtaking. We're doing it now with the very heart of people's identities, and we're doing it around this simple word. We're not meaning to do it, but you watch. It's going to come back over the net with a lot of top spin. People are already pissed off about it. I just don't think they quite understand why.
Yeah, let's actually back up for a second and talk about your foundation a little bit, because everything you're saying right now, I think, does get to a trend that I've been seeing for a while, which is I've had so many guests who come from academia, and so much of our national conversation is about outrage culture and cancel culture and what's happening at colleges. And now, because of YouTube, average people, and I mean that in the best sense of average, all of us can watch incredible thinkers give lectures. You can watch Jordan Peterson lectures on YouTube for free and maybe get more information from that than you can from a semester that you're paying 25 grand for. So talk about your foundation and sort of, can you just relate that a little bit to what you see happening with higher ed relative to if you have a trade right now? It's like you are essential, again, in the best sense of essential. That's not, I'm not putting down the non-essential. Maybe we can come up with a better word for it right now.
Well, we should, because everything has a season. And part of the reason we're locked in this endless feedback loop of nonsense is because we're in love with cookie cutter advice. And so we dispense it with certainty. And this is what politicians do to be elected. They have to. They have to say the thing that's going to resonate with the most people. And so they wind up retrenching to bromides and platitudes and tropes. That's what safety first is.
You're a little bit of everything. That actually is a pretty good explanation of you.
It actually is a pretty good explanation to me. I think I cover those multiple dichotomies fairly well.
Yeah, that would probably explain why you've written roughly 37,000 books, right? How many books have you written? I mean, I normally only put one book on the table. We put 4 here.
So far I've written 3 adult books and 3 kids books. I've got another kids book coming out in the spring, and I've got another adult book coming out going head to head with Jordan Peterson in January of 2020.
Oh.
Yeah.
I probably will be on tour with him for that book.
Right
that
on.
means that we're going to be in competition.
Okay, well, bring it.
All right, we'll see.
Okay, so it's nice to not actually have to compete with y'all.
Yeah. Well, do you feel like you're in competition with anyone? That's an interesting place to start off.
Well, I guess there's a dichotomy there too, because I don't feel like I'm in competition with anyone, and I feel like I'm in competition with everyone. That's just sort of, in my nature to just compete. But no, I mean, in this world that I'm in right now, I don't really feel like I'm competing with anyone. I feel like I'm just kind of doing what I do, talking about what I like to talk about, writing about what I like to write about, and hanging out with cool people most of the time.
Yeah, pretty good. All right, well, I think 99% of my audience knows who you are, knows a lot about you, but for the people that don't, and by the way, I should say, right before we start, I was saying, we have been trying to coordinate this for about 27 years, right? I mean, a long time, which is kind of funny. I mean, it really says, it's like, well, we're 2 people that are busy, and it was hard to really make this happen. But for the people that know nothing about you, tell me a little bit about your history.
I was born and raised in a small New England town. I was a rebellious kid. My best way to rebel as a kid coming from a small New England town was to join the military. So I joined the military after high school. I spent 20 years in the military. And when I retired from the military, I started taking the things that I had learned from the military and teaching them to civilian companies and civilian leaders. And eventually that turned into a book and a podcast and all this other stuff.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about what you were like that made you want to go into the military. What was that rebellious kid or whatever that was?
Yeah, I just grew up in a little New England town, and there was a lot of hippies and just kind of kids like that running around and smoking pot and whatever, and I really wasn't into that. And so, I think a lot of kids, when they rebel as kids, because all kids rebel, a lot of kids repel by drinking or they do drugs or whatever they're going to do. And I went in the other direction, was like into hardcore music, and eventually said, oh yeah, I'm just going to join the military because that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. It's funny, when you talk about it, it almost sounds like you're slightly dismissing it, but you had a pretty good storied career as a Navy SEAL.
Yeah, no, I grew up in the SEAL teams. I went right in the Navy, right in the SEAL teams, and that's where I spent my whole adult life. And it was an incredible experience, worked with a bunch of awesome people, and got to do things that I had dreamed about doing since I was a little kid.
What should we know about like the life of a Navy SEAL that you don't get in the movies? Or however else we just sort of imagine these lives to be?
I would say the biggest thing to remember is just that people in the SEAL teams and people in the military in general, they're people. They're just normal people. They go home, they got wives, they got kids, they're trying to live a normal life, and then their job requires them to do things that aren't very normal. And so they, for me, I kind of learned to compartmentalize what I was doing in the military. And when I'd come home, and I tell this to police officers and firefighters and military guys today, when you get home, don't bring your uniform home. Don't wear your uniform home. Like, physically take your uniform off, leave it at work, put on your civilian clothes when you go home, and be a civilian when you're home.
How hard is that, though, once you're sort of in that locked mindset, which obviously has so much to do with the things that you write about and why your message actually is working and helping people?
You say, how hard is it? Oh, it can be hard. It can be hard. Because you've got one life that you're living where decisions are really consequential, and then you've got your regular life that you're living, and things they aren't as consequential. I had a situation where I was at work, and there was a lot of stuff going on at work. They were They were redeploying people to Afghanistan. There was big decisions that were being made at work. And I remember I came home from work one day, and like I said, try to leave my work at work, but I'm sitting there thinking about how all this stuff is going to unfold. And my wife, I got home and my wife goes, I can't believe this. And I was like, what happened? Is everything okay? And she says, no, it's not okay. The Disney on Ice is the same night as some other events for the kids. And I'm just thinking, hey, if that's the biggest worries my wife has, then that's a positive thing.
Then life's pretty good.
Yeah, life's pretty good.
Yeah. So how quickly did you realize that you wanted to sort of bring these ideas about personal responsibility and sort of owning your life and all that into sort of that world, the world where Disney on Ice matters and the rest of it?
Yeah, I was about 6 months from retiring. I had a friend that was the CEO of a big company, and he said, I want you to come and talk to my executives about combat leadership. And I said, hey, sure, sounds cool. So I went and did it, and and I don't think he really knew what to expect, because I look like a knuckle dragger, and I'm at least a good portion. I actually am a knuckle dragger. And so he'd bring me in to talk, and I think he was maybe thinking I'd tell some cool war stories, and that'd be great. But I actually started talking about how you lead. And when I got done, he came up to me and said, I want you to do this for every division that I have in my company. And I said, well, I'm retiring. And he said, well, I'll give you money. And I said, okay. So I started working with all the different divisionals, and at one of those division meetings, the CEO of the parent company was there. And when I got done, he came up to me and said, I want you to come and talk to all my CEOs for all these companies that I own. And he owned like 45 or 50 companies. So I went and did that. And when I went and talked to those companies, of course, then a bunch of those CEOs came up to me and said, hey, I want you to come and talk to my company. So that's kind of the way that it started. And it didn't take me very long at all. I mean, it actually was the very first company, that first guy that I talked to, when that group started telling me about the problems they were having, I was sitting there thinking to myself, well, I saw these problems in SEAL platoons when I was training SEAL platoons. It's the same thing. It's leadership.
Yeah. Were you surprised that the big successful businesses were having such a leadership crisis?
I was surprised for about 5 minutes. And then I realized that these are all human beings. These are the same human beings that are in a SEAL platoon, in an Army company, and in a business. And they all have the same idiosyncrasies, they have the same egos, the same personalities. You can see it all. And when you've seen it all over and over again, it becomes pretty evident, pretty clear when you're looking at it. And the last job that I had in the SEAL teams, I was running the SEAL training for the West Coast SEAL teams. And this isn't the training where you see like the guys carrying the boats on their heads and carrying logs around and doing a bunch of push-ups and stuff. The training that I ran was the training where SEALs actually learn to go into combat and fight the enemy. And this is where we really start focusing on combat leadership. And so in this training that I ran, we got to take SEAL platoons and put them through really tough training scenarios, very realistic training scenarios, over and over and over again. So every night I'd basically be putting a new SEAL platoon through another training scenario, which the next night it would be another SEAL platoon going through the same training scenario, and then the next night would be another SEAL platoon going through the same training scenario. So you take these different SEAL platoons, and what's different about a SEAL platoon? What's different about a SEAL platoon is really just boils down to the leadership, because you got 16 SEALs in a SEAL platoon. The guys are basically the same. Sure, there's a bell curve, there's some top-end performers, there's some low-end performers, there's a bunch of guys in the middle. So the real variation on their performance was based almost 100% on their leadership. Mm-hmm. In fact, it was 100% on their leadership. And so I got to see this, and I got to watch these leadership scenarios unfold over and over again and see what leadership things worked and what didn't work. And so by the time I left that job and entered the civilian sector, I'd watch some random team of leaders inside of an organization, and I'd say to myself, oh, their strategic message isn't getting down to the frontline troops. They need to communicate this better. Or, oh, their departments aren't working together. They need to cover and move for each other. Or their mission is way too complex and that no one has any idea what they're actually supposed to be doing, so they need to simplify this. Or this senior leader is making all the decisions and therefore everything's moving really slow and nothing's happening at a good rate of speed, so they need to use decentralized command. And it was just so obvious when I started.
How much of leadership in general do you think is innate versus learned? Obviously, you're teaching people the learned part, but there has to be some element that's innate, right?
Yeah, there absolutely is. And there's the analogy that I give, and I don't play video games, but I've seen it. But on video games, you have a character in a video game, and you'll have a certain level of intelligence, and a certain level of strength, and a certain level of agility. And those levels are what you get, and then you work with them. Well, it's the same thing for a leader, and there's different characteristics that you get that are good for leadership, right? If you're someone that's really articulate, that's a great thing to have to be a good leader, because you want the human beings that you're talking to understand what you're actually saying. So, and different people are naturally more articulate than other people. Mm-hmm. It's good to be able to look at complex problems and be able to simplify them, right? That's a very powerful tool, to have a really complex thing to solve and be able to look at it and say, okay, simplify it, and then simplify it not only for yourself so you can decide what to do, but simplify it for your team so they understand what to do. Mm-hmm. That's a characteristic that some people have. The one that I bring up a lot, because it's very obvious, is being loud. Because if you're in a leadership position, you need to be able to make people hear you. Yeah. And some people are born with a very loud voice. I was luckily born with a very loud voice, and it's inherited from my genes, right? And my kids inherited. My kids can be very loud, which is sometimes problematic in a house. But if you can't bark a command so that people can hear you in a machine gun fight, no one's gonna be able to do what you ask them to do. Yeah. So there's these different characteristics, and you can improve upon them. So if you're not very articulate, you can read and you can write and you can speak and you can become more articulate. If you are not very good at simplifying problems, you can start looking at complex problems and thinking about how you can simplify them, and you can get better at that. The being loud part is, there's definitely a genetic aspect to that. So sure, you can learn to project your voice more, but some people aren't very loud. They're just born that way. Mm-hmm. And so what does a person do in that situation? Well, what a person does in that situation is, when they have to give an order, they tell one of the loudmouths in their platoon to tell everyone to get over in this other building now, and that loudmouth will pass the word. And so what you do as a leader is you find members for your team that can complement your weaknesses. So there are parts that you can improve, and there are parts that you can't improve. And the only real impediment to improving is someone that doesn't have the humility to say, you know what, I think I could work on being more articulate. Or, you know what, I think I could work on solving problems and making them more simple. Or, you know what, I'm not that loud. And instead of saying, you know what, that's not a good way to lead, instead I say, you know what, I'm not that loud, but Billy over here is loud, so I'm going to let him put the word out when it needs to get put out. But if you don't have the humility to do that, you won't improve as a leader.
Have you found those people that even if you lay out what the right skills are that they have to work on, or where their blind spots are, et cetera, that they just can't, whether it's ego or whatever else, that they just can't, certain people you just can't get through to?
Absolutely. It's a horrible situation to be in. And in the SEAL teams, those guys will get fired. In the civilian sector, generally, those guys get fired. Because, I mean, you go into a company and you've got a CEO that is not listening to anyone, up or down the chain, not listening to the board, not listening to his subordinates. How is he going to improve? He's not going to. And by the way, why does he need to improve? He needs to improve because his company isn't doing well. So, but this person might think, hey, I'm great. I'm not going to learn anything from anybody. I'm just going to keep doing it my way. And that guy's not going to stay in that job because they don't have the humility to say, you know what, I'm probably doing some things wrong. That's why we're not making money. And so I need to change some of the things that I'm doing so that we can make money. But if you don't have that attitude and you're not humble, yeah, you'll end up getting fired.
I said I'm prejudiced against two types of people: lazy people and stupid people. Everyone else, I'm okay with,
Yeah, I want to back up to something you said before about the government, because it was making me think of Wolf of Wall Street. So the thing about the movie, the movie's so freaking brilliant. I won't make you talk about it because you've talked about it a bajillion times. But you're the hero of the movie, obviously, and yet you're also doing some illegal shit. You're doing some immoral shit, right, or however you want to describe it. But you hate the feds more. You hate the people going after you more. And they're supposed to be the good guys in this, right? Because you're doing stuff with the penny stocks or whatever it is. And that, I think, sort of captures what you said about the government before. Like, they've done so much stuff now that it's sort of like The Sopranos. You're never rooting against Tony. He's killing people, and you're still rooting for him. Does that tell you something about how backwards everything is in an odd way?
Oh, I think that the lines of right and wrong morality have been very much blurred. I think people just realize, for example, it's just my case specifically, like, people know that, like, what I did was nothing compared to what they did at Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch. And these guys bankrupted Iceland and Greece and almost took down the entire world economy. and no one went to jail. Like, at least I went to jail for a couple of years and did my time, and like I had to pay the price and I had to rebuild my life. Like, that was like 1,000 times worse. Doesn't mean that what I did was right, but people also saw like this sort of, I think people like almost the tortured soul type. Like I'm like, you're watching me walk off the edge. Why you stop? Don't do it. Like, so I think people see there was goodness in me, there was misguidedness in me, and I think people like that complexity, and you can root for someone who I think you feel like genuinely they're almost their own worst enemy. They're not killing people. And even, by the way, with Tony, you can root for Tony too. But like in this case, I'm not killing people, but you're saying, why? And I think people can see themselves in a lot of the characters in that type of movie. And that's Scorsese's brilliance, by the way. Like, he doesn't moralize. He just puts characters up that are actually real and complex. And you're watching good people do bad things and people that are terrible people do good things.
When you look back on all that, like, are you just like, even when you post pictures a lot of times on Instagram, you'll post pictures of what you were doing back then, 30 years ago, like what you were actually doing. Like, are you like, man, that was just freaking great? Even though, how long were you in jail for?
22 months. So,
all right,
it wasn't a terrible jail.
A little more than Jesse Smollett, but
yeah. Right. Oh God Almighty, another character in that, right? One thing I'll say is that when I look back at what happened, the one thing I wish I did less of was the drugs.
Yeah.
The drugs did not enhance things. They corrupted a lot of things, and they made a lot of memories like really far less enjoyable and colorful than they should have been. For example, I've fallen asleep in the finest restaurants in the world. I can say I got booked for a speech in next month in Monaco, right?
Yeah.
And they got a beautiful suite at the Hotel de Paris, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, I fell asleep at the Louis XIV restaurant in a bowl of soup. And it's $12,000 dinner. I can't remember it, but I remember it was 12 grand, and I felt my wife had to pick my head up out of the frickin' soup, right? Yeah. So like that was like the story of my life. So that aspect, I look back and say, I wish I could have, done things differently with the drugs. But other than that, when I look at it, I wouldn't change anything because it was like what got me to this point in my life. Obviously, I made some mistakes. I had a lot of fun, did a lot of things right as well. But I think looking back at your life and trying to say, I shouldn't have done that, I don't think it's healthy.
What do you think kept you going like that? You're not broken now. Like, you're so thriving. It's every time I'm around you, and everyone knows it. Like, you're infectious with your energy. This is exactly who you are off camera. Like, you just freaking love life. Like, how did you ever get to a point where you were like starting to break or anything like that?
Yeah, of course I did. I mean, I think that, the worst part was before I went to jail. It's like you're dying in slow motion, and that's like where you can't,
because you're going,
and you can't restart your life, and it's like it was like I lived in the big house still. They hadn't taken. It's like Rome, the falling empire of Rome. Like if you're watching the house collapse or everything collapse around me, right? For me, the amount of pride that I took in rebuilding my life ethically, I can't tell you like what that meant to be. To go out and prove to myself, to my children. That was really not the world, to my children, that I would just go out right again and just do things so straight as an arrow and empower people all over the world and make even more money. And like, to me, that was like, and that just like was like something that just kept me going in the early days, and it just snowballed and fed in itself. And yeah, my life today is far better than it ever was back in the craziest times of Stratton.
Yeah, that's got to be a crazy retraining, right? To try to do things fully on the up and up. We were going to try to do something, and I have a feeling we'll do something in the future. But even when we were in the little negotiations and then things just moved too fast, you were basically like, just give me something and I'll make it work. Like, you didn't want to negotiate. You were just like, let's make it nice and easy. And then things just happened to move along in a different way. But like, was that a real shift for you? Like, how you're going to do business? Like, actually how you're going to engage in that?
So, yes and no. I think one of the lessons I learned was that if you're a really good negotiator, right, and you negotiate a deal where it's so great for you and bad for the other people, that's not a good negotiation. Yeah. It just ends up in a lawsuit, aka Steve Madden's shoes. Like when Steve came to me, he was very young, he was naive, and I took his company from him legally, and I took 85% because he didn't know better, and all I did was create animosity down the road. So I don't think a great negotiation is when you get such a good deal that you fuck everyone else over. And also just like, I just refuse to cut corners. Like in my life, my value system right now is it's just based on creating value for people. So there's a reason why I haven't, why didn't you launch any NFTs yet? There's a reason why I haven't launched NFTs, because I'm not sure if the market is ready. And I don't know, I'll make a quick 10 million, but probably the people who buy them might lose a quick 7 million. So I didn't do it. I would love to have the extra money, but I have enough money. I'm not gonna engage in transactions or any business practices that I'm not giving more value than I receive. And frankly, I've ended up making more money because of that. It's my greed shows me. If I'm greedy, that means do that. Give people more value because you make more in the long run.
I did not get an essay book of the things that you won't talk about, but I don't want to do politics with you because I think it's a good escape. This is meta politics in a way.
Of course.
But in a time like we live in right now, where politics seems crazy, everyone's trying to destroy each other, all of those things. Do you have any tricks that you use for yourself or that you've recommended to other people to scale back? I mean, one of the things I try to show people is that your worldview just can't be political.
Yeah.
You know, if your worldview is just politics, you're always doing this. You've got blinders on, and you need a much bigger philosophical, religious, whatever it is, whatever your worldview is, it needs to be much wider. Do you have any tricks? Because it seems like everyone everywhere, and I know I'm sort of self-selected into this thing because when anyone sees me at the store, they want to talk politics with me. But I do sense people, it's making people crazier. It's making people angrier. You know, they just released this big study about how depressed people are right now. And
I remember when I started being an entrepreneur, after leaving my brother's, I paid $250 a month for my brother's place to have a room from his place, right? And I started making enough money to get an apartment for $495 a month. And it was the scariest thing to write a check for $495 because I was like, I don't know how I'm going to pay this next month. But I got the cheapest apartment I could in Columbus, Ohio. And I remember, and I didn't have a car at the time, so I was walking everywhere. And I remember saying to myself, I'm not going to get a TV. And for the first few years, I didn't have a TV, and I just focused on my mission and my vision, which was creation, which was getting customers and sales and adding value to those customers and clients. And not having a TV was a big blessing. I love movies and I love TV, so I would go to the movies all the time, but I wouldn't allow myself to browse and see chaos on a screen until midnight and then go to sleep with nightmares from the chaos. So personally, I remember I had Marianne Williamson on my show, and I told her, you know, I really don't watch the news. And she goes, you need to watch the news. Like, you need to be informed, especially as like a white male. You need to know what's happening in the world. And I go, but you can get the news from different places. I don't need to watch the TV to get the news. I can check, you know, Apple News or whatever, or get someone to tweet me something and check it out. And people are going to tell you the news no matter what.
Right. You can't really escape the news.
I try to focus on, I truly believe that when I focus on giving to people and service, I'm a happier human being. And research has backed science of happiness, that when you're in contribution to someone else, whether it's opening the door, buying a coffee, having a conversation, listening to someone when they're going through something, doing charity work, whatever it may be, that makes you the happiest when we're giving to others. So when we're focused on self and what we don't have, suffering is the result of obsessive, self-centric thinking. So when I'm thinking of the news, this is not working in my favor. This is an outrage, or I'm not happy about this because it's not helping me. You're going to be unhappy. And I'm not saying you shouldn't fight for what you want and have things to change, sure. But if you want to be happier, focus on other people, focus on service. And also don't watch the news. And as media companies ourselves, we want people to watch us. But I think focus on things that bring you joy. I think as adults, we don't play enough. You know, in my studio, I got a Frisbee, and we love to work hard. You know, our team works hard, but I'll grab Matt, our COO, or my friend, and I say, we need 5 minutes just to throw the Frisbee. Like, we need to play. Who plays anymore?
I know.
Especially if you can't go outside, you can't do this. Who's playing?
Well, I'm chasing a 1-year-old dog.
Exactly, right?
So that,
But I'm like a big advocate of play over watching TV. Go do something fun. I went out to, I've been in LA for 8 years. How long have you been here?
About 8 years.
8 years.
Yeah, 7.5. Yeah.
Literally 2 days ago, the first time I went to Franklin Canyon Lake or Park. Have you been to this place?
I don't even know what that is.
This is 10 minutes from here. It's a lake in nature of like 100 acres in the middle of LA where you can't see the city. It's literally in the middle of Mulholland Drive.
Never heard of this place.
It's unbelievable. I saw a photo of it on Instagram.
We got a lake?
We got a lake and like ducks and turtles and everything. And I went there on Sunday with my girlfriend and our dog, and it was just like, we're in nature, we're hanging out. I'm not watching TV, I'm not on social media. I'm a big salsa dancer. I love
Really?
salsa. For 15 years, I've been salsa dancing around the world. I play guitar. I like to play sports, work out. I'm just like, go do something that's going to contribute and benefit your life and contribute and benefit someone else's life. When you do those things, you're going to be a better person. I'm learning Spanish. I'm trying all these different things that get me away from the train wreck of the news. So that's what I recommend. Don't obsess yourself into what's not working for you. Go be the change.
Do you sense that right now, because of Corona, because of protests, because everything is so seemingly chaotic, that people are becoming more receptive to the type of stuff you're talking about? Because I can just, for me, like, I started gardening since we started doing this. So I'll show you when we get out of here. We got we're growing a ton of great stuff out there.
Some carrots, man.
I don't know carrots. I got tomatoes, I got cucumbers, I got zucchini, I got broccoli, peppers. But like I started doing that. I'm cooking a lot more. David usually cooks a ton, but now I'm barbecuing all the time, and like I'm refining some skills, and like I think there's a unique opportunity in this mess to either come out of it more skilled, more refined, more passionate about what you do, or maybe realize that what you were doing before isn't what you want to do, or all that stuff.
Yeah.
Versus some people that I think are just going to have slogged through it and not really thought about their life critically enough, and then they'll just be on the other side and the world will be different. And
I'm on both sides here. If you need to take a pause and rest for these last 3 months because you've been go nonstop for 10 years and you had never taken a pause in your life, this is the most beautiful time for you to sit around and do nothing and read a book and lounge and not hustle. So for some people, I think that is what you need. And personally, my philosophy is I feel like this is what the world needed in general, is for us to take a pause with technology being so fast, with us on social media. Most people are on their phones 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and a lot of it's social media. It's like, what are we consuming our time with? It's not what we're supposed to be doing all day.
pretty sure it's not making us happier.
It's not making us happier. It's making us more neurotic of like, I need more likes, I need more follows, I need to, what's happening in the news? It's just, it's craziness. And so for some, I think, don't do anything, and that's what you need. You need to reevaluate why your life isn't working, why this relationship. I'm seeing so many people, I'm not sure if you're seeing this, a lot of big personalities are posting, we're getting a divorce. We're going through a breakup. You're finally evaluating your relationship.
Mm-hmm. Well, now you're trapped in the house with someone every minute for 3 months. You might start going, do I like this guy?
You can't escape anymore. So I think people are getting clear on what they want
Yeah.
because they haven't been clear for a long time. Maybe partly, but not fully. So for some people, you need a pause. You need a break. You need to evaluate. You need to take inventory of everything in your life and create a new game plan moving forward. You need to find some coaches and mentors and have a game plan and go take action. For other people, I'm kind of in the middle. I feel like I've hustled more in my business. I've hired more people. I've been like more creative than ever. But I'm also going to the park and relaxing with my girlfriend and my dog on the weekends, which I would never do. And I'm taking that time to be in nature. So I feel like I'm trying to do both and balance my personal life, but then work, going kind of all in and getting clearer, like what does our audience need right now? What does our customers need? What do they need for the next 5 to 10 years if this doesn't change? So I'm a little in the middle, and I have empathy for both sides. But I think if you can rediscover what you want to do in your life and who you want to become, whether you take action on it now or just discover it now, that's what we should be doing.
This will be my 5th August off the grid, and one of the things that I've noticed is because I try to work on exercise and diet and sleeping better and just general digital detox and relaxation, I've noticed in the 4 previous years that I've done this, that my dreams are more vivid during that time. Maybe it's from being less distracted or something. So just broadly, what the hell is going on when we're dreaming, and what can we do to, I suppose, maybe gain more insight from our dreams or something to that effect?
Yeah, and actually, I have a quick question for you. So when you're doing the detox, will your sleep schedule change where you may start to go to bed a little bit later and wake up a little bit later?
No, I'll be going to bed earlier usually because I'm not doing as much during the day. So, for a portion of this, and perhaps right now as this is being aired, I'm hoping that I'm on the beach and it's a nice bright sunny day and I'm under
umbrella and it's about 3 p.m. and I'm napping. That would be nice. But then, you know, after a day out on the beach, by 9 o'clock, there's a good chance I could be sleeping. And then I'm still, regardless of when I go to sleep at night, I'm an early riser. That definitely is something new to me the last couple of years of my life, where it's like, and maybe that's partly sunshine in LA. You know, it's sunny here usually at about 6 or 6:30 a.m. And I'm usually just kind of ready to go at that point. But I probably will get a significant amount more of sleep in the course of these 30 days or so.
Got it. So firstly, to stick a pin in the daylight component, daylight will absolutely regulate your sleep timing. And you can use it on both ends. If you get too much light exposure in the evening, then it will block a hormone called melatonin, which is critical to signal to your brain it's nighttime and it's time to sleep. And so when we have too much electric light or we're using our computers at night, it stamps the brakes on melatonin. And that's why some people can struggle with sleep at night. So try to dim down half of the lights in your home in the last hour before sleep. And then you can reverse engineer the trick in the morning. Get lots of daylight. You know, LA is a great place to do that. And it enlivens you because it now sort of that daylight will apply once again the brakes on melatonin and it will help you wake up. But coming back to dreams and the function of dreams, dreams seem to, or REM sleep dreaming at least, seems to provide at least two different benefits. The first is creativity. What we found is that it's during dream sleep when the brain takes all of the information that it's been learning and it starts to fuse it together in creative and innovative ways. You know, it's almost like informational alchemy. And so we go to sleep with the pieces of the jigsaw, but we wake up with the puzzle complete. And that's one of the creative benefits of sleep. You know, and there's a reason that no one has ever told you to stay awake on a problem. Yeah. And there's a very good scientific basis for exactly that. The second interesting thing that we've discovered, and we've done quite a lot of work in this area, is that REM sleep dreaming provides a form of emotional first aid. And you can think of dreaming as overnight therapy. And REM sleep dreams will take those difficult experiences, sometimes even traumatic experiences that you've been having, and it acts like a nocturnal soothing balm. And it just takes the sharp edges off those painful, difficult experiences so that you come back the next day and they don't feel as painful anymore. And so I think in that sense, dreaming, you can think of it as, well, it's not time that heals all wounds. It's time during dream sleep that provides emotional convalescence. And those are the two functions that we've been strongly associating with REM sleep dreaming.
What about people that don't remember their dreams? I always find it so odd, because I really do remember my dreams. Every now and again, I'll have a notepad by the side of my bed and I'll scribble something down that I want to remember for the next morning, something like that. And I do find that there are insights and I can piece together something that maybe I couldn't have otherwise. What about people that just have no memory of their dreams? You hear about that every now and again.
Yeah, it's not infrequent. It's not necessarily pathological. It's not something that you have to worry about or go and see your doctor about. We don't truly understand why there are those individual differences. We certainly know that they are present, but we also know that those people who say, look, I just don't dream, it's not really that you don't dream, as you said, it's that you don't remember your dreams. Because if I bring those people into my sleep center here at University of California, Berkeley, and we can clearly see that they're going into dream sleep. And in fact, if I go into the bedroom, well, when they're in a REM sleep phase and I wake them up and I say, can you just tell me what was going through your mind before I woke you up? They will say, it's the strangest thing. I was having a dream for the first time. It's just that when they wake up in the morning, that memory seems to evaporate too quickly and it doesn't seem to be committed to conscious memory recollection. Does it mean that that memory isn't there at all? I actually don't think that that's true. I think it's quite possible that we remember much more of our dreaming lives than we are consciously aware of or that we have conscious accessibility to. But what we know from brain science is that implicit memory, information that you're not consciously aware of, can still profoundly change your decisions and your actions and your behaviors. So it leads to a wacky hypothesis that, in fact, much more of our waking life is determined by our imprinted dream life, but we just don't have conscious access to that dreaming. And I say that because, I'm sure you've had that experience too, where you wake up and you think, I was dreaming. I know what was that dream?
What was that?
And
yeah.
it's just gone. And then 2 days later, you're getting into your car and you see the keychain, and it instantly triggers the unlocking of the memory of that dream. In other words, that memory was always there. Mm-hmm. You'd lost the IP address to go and find it for conscious recollection. And if it's still there, it could still be changing your behavior.
All right. I said the dreams was the last question, but I'll give myself one bonus question here, which is, do you have one other tip or trick that I can incorporate into this month so that I come back as well rested and ready to go and be back in the crazy political and cultural fight that I find myself in 11 months out of the year?
You are a brave, brave man knowing what you do, and I admire it greatly. I am far too thin-skinned to be doing what you do. But
you're definitely a wiser man, so yeah.
Let's not rush to judgment. I've probably in the past 45 minutes just proven that to be wrong as well. But I will give you one conventional tip and one unconventional tip.
Great.
The first conventional tip is regularity. If I could give you one single thing to start doing, go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, no matter whether it's the weekday or the weekend. And regularity is king. And the reason, because I don't think people respond to rules that are just barked at them. They respond to the reasons, not the rules. And the reason is this, that your brain has its own 24-hour clock. And it responds best to sort of the recognition of regularity. So when it's getting regularity, it's going to anchor your sleep. And as I said, improve the quantity and the quality of that sleep. So aim for regularity no matter what day it is. In terms of an unconventional tip, and this may sound a little bit strange, but if you have a bad night of sleep, and everyone has them, I am not immune just because I know a little bit about sleep. I have got my big share of bad nights, and I've had my own bouts of insomnia that I've battled and struggled with. But after a bad night of sleep, people will say, what should I do? And my answer is do nothing. And what I mean by that is don't wake up any later. Don't drink any more coffee the next day. Don't nap during that day. And don't go to bed any earlier than you would otherwise. Do nothing. Just stay the course and repeat the same behavior. Because if you wake up later, then you're not going to build up enough of that sleep pressure that we spoke about for you to fall asleep at your normal time because you slept in later. And second, if you go to bed too early because you think last night was so bad, I should get to bed early, your body is not expecting to sleep at that different time, that new earlier time. So you're just going to lie in bed awake, tossing and turning, and it's going to be even worse. And then obviously caffeine and naps we've spoken about too. So the best unconventional advice if you've had a bad night of sleep is do nothing. Stick to your routine.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about lifestyles instead of nonstop yelling, check out our lifestyle playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, check out our full episode playlist. They're both right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.